The most disturbing ancient discovery you were never meant to see. For most of human history, we believed the past was settled, that the rise of civilization followed a simple, predictable line. Stone, bronze, iron, progress, collapse, progress again. A long, slow climb from primitive hands toward the world we know today. But every now and then, the earth opens a crack wide enough for something older to breathe through it. Something that refuses to fit inside the neat timeline we were taught. This story begins with a scan. Not a camera, not a shovel, not an archaeological expedition with hundreds of people, but a pulse of light. LIDAR. A technology designed to map terrain, measure forests, and help engineers understand the ground beneath their feet. Not to rewrite history, not to challenge entire academic systems. And yet, that's exactly what it did. When the first data appeared on the screen, it didn't make sense. The researcher expected to see a slope of ordinary bedrock. Instead, perfect angles emerged from under the soil, straight lines, parallel corridors, geometric faces buried beneath centuries of sediment. The computer rendered them slowly, almost reluctantly, as if the earth itself wasn't ready to reveal what it had been hiding. At first, the team thought it was an artifact of the scan. A glitch, a software error, something too symmetrical to be natural, too precise to be ancient, and certainly too massive to belong to any culture we know. But the more filters they applied, the more undeniable it became. There was a structure under the mountain, and it was enormous. The next step wasn't excavation, it was hesitation. Because every archaeologist knows that discoveries like this, the kind that break rules instead of following them, carry consequences. Funding is lost, careers end, institutions turn away. The history we teach is a fragile agreement, and anything that threatens to disturb it is treated as a problem, not a possibility. Still, ground-penetrating radar was brought in. Not officially, not publicly. Quietly, by a handful of specialists who understood what was at stake. They lowered the antenna into the soil and watched as the signal reflected back, layer by layer, depth by depth. And what appeared on the monitor froze every voice in the room. Blocks. Not boulders. Not fractured sediment, but blocks, titanic stone slabs weighing 200, maybe 300 tons each, cut with edges so straight they seemed machined, placed with a precision that modern cranes would struggle to achieve, and arranged in a pattern that was not defensive, not ceremonial, not decorative, but intentional, intelligent, aligned with an astronomical direction that predates every known civilization. When the first archaeologist stepped into the clearing where the excavation would begin, he didn't feel excitement. He felt dread, because if the scans were correct, then this structure was older than the end of the last ice age, older than agriculture, older than the cultures we call the first, and nothing about that should be possible. The dig revealed just a fraction of the truth. A wall, if wall is even the right word, emerged from under the soil. A monolith of interlocking blocks, each one the size of a small house. Their surfaces carried a strange mix of brutality and perfection. Erosion carved by thousands of years of wind and water, but edges that still sliced straight as if untouched by time. And then came the silence. The team was told to stop. Permits were revoked, access was restricted. Reports disappeared from internal channels. The stated reason was geological instability. But those present knew better. They knew what they had seen, and they knew why it was being covered. Because this structure doesn't challenge a single chapter of human history. It challenges all of them. It suggests technology where there should be none. Engineering where only stone tools are supposed to exist. Knowledge that should have been impossible for a prehistoric world, and a timeline far older, far more complex than anything our textbooks allow. But the most disturbing part isn't the structure itself. It's the question that follows. If a civilization capable of building this once existed, why did it vanish so completely? And how many others have we lost beneath the soil, the oceans, the ice? Tonight, we examine the discovery they hoped would stay buried, the structure no one was meant to see, and the truth that may force us to rewrite every page of humanity's past. This is not just archaeology. This is a warning carved in stone from a world that came before ours. There are places on Earth that seem ordinary at first glance. Quiet valleys, forgotten ridges, patches of forest that never made it onto postcards or travel guides. Places that slip through history unnoticed, not because they lack importance, but because they're too far from the centers of power, too removed from any story someone cared to write. The discovery that triggered this entire investigation began in one of those places, a remote corner of the Andes, where mountains rise like broken teeth and the wind carries a silence so old it feels almost sentient. For generations, this region was known only to local shepherds who guided their flocks across the high slopes. They knew every bend, every stream, every dangerous patch of loose rock where a single misstep could end a life. To them, the land was not mysterious, just ancient, unchanged, uninterested in the passage of time. But occasionally, when the fog pulled back and sunlight exposed the jagged cliffs, someone would notice something strange, a line too straight to be natural, a shadow that followed an angle instead of a curve. Some would speak of stones that didn't belong, half buried under moss and dust as if pushed upward by the mountain itself. Stories like these appear everywhere in remote locations, rarely taken seriously, often dismissed as folk imagination. So when a small environmental survey team arrived to scan the terrain for erosion studies, no one expected anything remarkable. Their mission was supposed to be routine: capture LIDAR data, map water flow, and produce a standard geological report. But the land had other plans. On the second day, just after dawn, the team sent a drone over a narrow ravine bordered by steep cliffs. The LIDAR pulses scanned through vegetation that had not been disturbed in centuries. When the data returned, the first operator frowned, not in shock, but in confusion. The screen displayed a formation that didn't match any known geological pattern. A set of perfectly aligned vertical surfaces appeared where the mountain should have been jagged. He increased resolution. The shapes sharpened. The angles tightened, and a subtle dread crept into his voice as he called the others over. They stared at the image. None of them spoke, because what appeared beneath the canopy wasn't a rock formation, it was architecture. The official logs from that day are brief, far too brief for the magnitude of what they captured. But the private notes of the team, recovered later through anonymous leaks, paint a different picture. They describe a section of the mountain that behaved like a facade, not a natural cliff. They mention seams that extended many meters downward, as if following an enormous buried structure. And they hint that someone higher up, someone who saw the raw LIDAR frames, immediately labeled the discovery as sensitive. That was the first red flag. Within a week, access to the area was restricted. Drone flights were suddenly prohibited due to avalanche risk. A new team, this one from a government-affiliated institute, took control of the site. But instead of investigating the anomaly, they closed off the route and filed the project under an internal category used for projects that never see the light of day. Normally, this is where stories like this end. A discovery is made, intercepted, silenced, archived, forgotten. But not this time, because curiosity is stubborn, and the mountain had not given up its secret. It had only hinted at it. Months later, a separate group of specialists who heard rumors of the anomaly returned quietly, without permits, without institutional backing, willing to risk everything to confirm what the first scans suggested. They hiked through dense brush, climbed unstable ridges, and camped in the shadow of cliffs where no official expedition had ever been authorized. When they reached the ravine, the air felt different, charged, expectant, as if the earth knew they had come for something it had protected for thousands of years. They began their survey at dawn. With limited equipment, a portable GPR unit, a drone modified with a custom LIDAR array, and old-fashioned physical measurements, they mapped the same slope the first team had scanned. It didn't take long. Once again, the mountain's facade appeared, stubbornly geometric, defiantly artificial. But this time, they pushed deeper. Beneath the surface, the radar revealed layers of stone descending in perfect intervals. Not natural layering, not sediment. Blocks. Blocks so large the software struggled to estimate their dimensions. Blocks arranged in a pattern unmistakably deliberate. The team had only one explanation. They were standing on top of something vast. As excavation began, skeptics predicted the structure would dissolve into random rocks, that the perfect shapes were illusions created by technology, that nature, given enough time, could mimic architecture. And sometimes, it can. But not this time. The first stone they cleared was the size of a small car. Its surface was smooth, almost machined. The second stone was even larger, so massive that 3 people together couldn't move it even a few centimeters. And then came the third stone, the one that changed everything. It was enormous. A titan of basalt weighing more than 200 tons, carved with a precision that mocked the timeline of human development. The edges were still sharp despite thousands of years underground. The sides met at angles so exact they seemed digitally rendered. And the seams, those seams, were impossibly tight, thin as a razor's edge. Nothing about that stone made sense. Not its size, not its shape, not its placement under layers of Ice Age sediment, not the fact that it formed part of a larger wall extending deep into the earth. But the most disturbing detail wasn't the engineering. It was the impossibility of its age. The dating of surrounding sediment indicated the structure had been buried before the end of the last Ice Age, long before the rise of agriculture, writing, or even the formation of most known cultures. According to the timeline we rely on, no civilization existed then. No technology capable of quarrying, transporting, or lifting blocks of this scale. No mathematics advanced enough to produce the geometry they were staring at. And yet, the wall was there. The team didn't know whether they had uncovered the last piece of a forgotten civilization, a survivor of a global cataclysm, or something even older, an inheritance from a time erased by fire, flood, or memory. But they knew one thing. This place was never meant to be found. And the deeper they dug, the more the mountain revealed, not reluctantly, but as if it had been waiting. When the first massive block finally emerged from the dirt, the team stared at it for a long time, silent, as if speaking aloud might break whatever ancient equilibrium they had just disturbed. The block was too large, too precise, too deliberate. But it wasn't until they began clearing the soil around its edges that the true scale of the discovery came into focus. The block wasn't isolated. It wasn't a fallen fragment. It wasn't debris from a collapsed structure. It was part of a wall so massive, so perfectly cut, so deeply buried that its very existence challenged everything archaeology claims to know about early human civilization. The team worked methodically, brushing away sediment that had compacted over thousands of years. Every sweep of the brush revealed more impossible geometry. Edges that had not crumbled, corners that remained razor-sharp, surfaces still flat enough to reflect light like polished stone. And the basalt. That was the most shocking part. Basalt is volcanic rock, harder than granite. Carving it even with modern steel tools is almost unthinkable. The builders of this wall had shaped it with a mastery that defied the timeline of human progress. When they cleared an additional meter of sediment, the second block revealed itself, stacked seamlessly atop the first, its edges fitting so tightly that not even a blade of grass could slip between them. The third block was bigger still, dwarfing the others. And beneath that, the LIDAR scans suggested more, many more, stretching downward and sideways into the mountain as though the slope itself had been engineered around the structure. The team leader, a quiet, unassuming geologist named Dr. Elias Montalvo, tried to remain rational. He checked the tools, recalibrated the instruments, and verified every reading twice. But nothing changed. The data insisted on the same conclusion. The wall predated the last major glaciation, which meant it was older than 12,000 years, older than Göbekli Tepe, older than agriculture, older than anything resembling organized human society. That conclusion felt like blasphemy. "Stone cannot lie," one of the team members whispered, almost to himself. "But history can." For hours, the team expanded the excavation site, pushing deeper into the earth. The more they revealed, the more impossible the engineering became. Each block appeared to be fitted using a technique unknown even to the great builders of Egypt or Peru. Not mortise and tenon, not polygonal masonry. Something different, something far more advanced. Then came the moment that shifted the mood from awe to fear. Near the base of the wall, one of the archaeologists brushed away a layer of compacted silt and uncovered a set of faint markings, etched grooves arranged in repeating intervals, almost like a script. They didn't match Incan, pre-Incan, or any indigenous writing systems. They didn't match anything at all. The grooves ran with mathematical precision, as if encoded with information, geometric sequences, not words. The markings weren't decorative. They were functional, like the notches inside a machine. Suddenly, the wall didn't feel like a monument. It felt like a mechanism. One member of the team suggested the markings might be acoustic, designed to resonate at specific frequencies. Another argued they resembled stress distribution cuts used in modern high-pressure engineering. A third theorized they were alignment guides for something once attached to the wall. Every theory made the others uneasy, because all of them implied the same thing. This wall wasn't just built, it was designed. That night, as winds howled across the ridge and darkness swallowed the ravine, the team reviewed their data by lantern light. The LIDAR scans clearly showed the wall extended at least 12 meters deep into the mountain, forming a structure far larger than anyone expected. The GPR readings suggested multiple internal chambers, hollow spaces arranged in a vertical pattern, like rooms in a buried tower. And the thermal scans revealed something even stranger: residual heat signatures trapped within the structure, as though the interior maintained a temperature slightly higher than the surrounding rock. Residual heat from what? Someone asked. No one answered. At dawn, they resumed excavation. Within an hour, they uncovered the fourth block, and this one was unlike the others. Its surface was scored with long horizontal grooves, evenly spaced, each one cut with such precision that it looked like a lathe had shaped the stone. But lathes did not exist in prehistory, nor did diamond-tipped drills, nor did any tools capable of carving basalt in such perfect lines, unless the builders had something we don't, or something we've forgotten. As they worked, Dr. E. Ho Montalvo noticed something unsettling in the drone footage. The arrangement of the blocks followed a repeating geometric pattern, ratios matching those found in ancient megalithic constructions around the world. The same proportions used at Sacsayhuaman. The same angles found in the Osirian. The same alignment principles applied in the pyramids. Different continents, different eras, same blueprint. And that was when the team realized they weren't uncovering a local anomaly. They were uncovering a global memory. The deeper they went, the clearer the pattern became. The blocks were not arranged randomly. They formed tiers, platforms, steps, each one oriented toward magnetic north as it existed more than 12,000 years ago. Whoever built this structure knew astronomy, knew geophysics, knew mathematics. They knew things that, according to history, no humans of that era should have known. But the most disturbing discovery came late in the afternoon, when a volunteer clearing soil from the lowest visible seam let out a startled cry. The earth had collapsed beneath her brush, revealing a narrow opening. Not natural erosion, not an animal burrow, a doorway, a sealed doorway. The entrance was framed by two colossal blocks, each over 100 tons, forming a wedge-shaped threshold. The seam ran with surgical precision from top to bottom. And in the center, covered by thousands of years of dust, was a symbol. an engraved circle intersected by 3 lines, arranged in a pattern seen nowhere in known Andean archaeology. Everyone froze. They knew immediately that whatever lay behind that doorway had been sealed intentionally, and that someone, long ago, had taken great care to bury it. This wasn't collapsed, Dr. Montalvo said quietly. It was entombed. Those words hung in the cold air like a warning, because nothing about the site felt abandoned. It felt hidden, buried deliberately, protected deliberately, forgotten deliberately, and for the first time, the team began to understand the magnitude of what they had uncovered. Not a wall, not a ruin, not a site, a message, left by a people we don't remember, for a future they knew would one day rediscover it. But the message wasn't finished yet. The doorway was still sealed. And whatever lay inside was the part of the story no one was meant to see. No one touched the doorway at first. They only stared at it, as if their minds needed time to catch up with the implications of what they were seeing. A sealed stone threshold, buried deliberately beneath thousands of years of earth, engineered with precision that rivaled modern machining. It contradicted everything. It broke every timeline. It mocked every assumption archaeology had accepted as truth. But the most disturbing part wasn't the doorway itself. It was the symbol carved into its center. A perfect circle intersected by 3 straight lines. Not decorative, not random. A symbol of intent. A mark left by a people who clearly understood geometry, astronomy, and the mathematics of resonance. It was a language older than writing, older than cities, older than the world as we know it. And they had placed it here, on a sealed entrance meant to remain closed. The team began documenting the find. Photographs were taken, measurements recorded, samples collected. But throughout that process, one undeniable fact overshadowed the excitement. The entrance was not sealed by time. It was sealed by design. No collapse, no weathering, no fracture. Someone long ago had sealed it from inside. When they cleared more debris from the threshold, the full outline of the doorway revealed itself. The seam forming its perimeter was impossibly tight. No gaps, no erosion, no signs of degradation. Even the corners were sharp enough to cut skin. When they placed a micrometer along the groove, the reading was so precise that one of the researchers muttered, almost dazed, "This isn't ancient masonry, this is engineering." But how could a culture predating the last Ice Age engineer basalt with this kind of perfection? How could they cut and shape blocks weighing more than 100 tons, aligning them with sub-millimeter accuracy, without metal tools, cranes, or machinery? Unless the timeline of human civilization is wrong, or civilization didn't begin with us. As the team expanded the excavation area, they discovered something even more unsettling. Faint discolorations along the edges of the doorway. At first they assumed it was mineral staining, but under ultraviolet light, the marks glowed faintly. Residual traces of heat exposure. Not natural geothermal heating, controlled heating. Someone had sealed this doorway using thermal bonding, fusing basalt the way modern industrial furnaces fuse ceramic. A technique unknown in ancient architecture. A technique we barely understand today. Dr. Montalvo's voice trembled as he ran his palm near the seam, careful not to touch it. This wasn't just closed, he said. It was welded shut. The realization sent a ripple of unease through the group. If the doorway had been welded from the inside, whoever sealed it had intended never to reopen it. The structure wasn't meant to be accessed again, not by them, not by anyone. So what were they trying to contain? The team debated whether to open it. There were risks, structural collapse, gas pockets, pathogens sealed for millennia, or something worse, the unknown. But the weight of the discovery, its implications for science, for history, for the very foundation of human origins, was too great to ignore. They had no choice. They had to open it. The team brought in a diamond-tipped core drill. But when they attempted to cut into the seam, the drill barely scratched the surface. The basalt resisted with unnatural hardness, far exceeding the expected density. They tried again with increased pressure. Nothing. The doorway seemed to push back, as if it was designed to prevent intrusion. When they switched to a thermal lance, capable of reaching temperatures above 3,000 degrees, the result was even more disturbing. The basalt didn't melt or crack. Instead, it emitted a low-frequency hum, faint but unmistakable, vibrating through the stone like an instrument being awakened. A resonance, the same kind of resonance seen in megalithic structures around the world. The same frequencies aligned with Earth's natural electromagnetic field. The same harmonics that ancient builders seemed obsessed with. It wasn't a wall. It wasn't a tomb. It was a system. Something built using principles we still don't understand. The hum ceased after a few seconds, leaving the team frozen in place. The silence afterward felt heavy, charged, as if the mountain itself were listening. One researcher stepped back and whispered, "It's reacting." But stone doesn't react. Structures don't react, unless they were built to. The team paused work that evening, shaken by what happened. They reviewed the vibration readings, compared the resonance patterns, and analyzed the thermal response. The data suggested something extraordinary. The doorway was absorbing energy, redirecting it, dispersing it, as if it was built to neutralize attempts at forced entry. A security mechanism, a protection system, a warning. When night fell, the air grew colder, and the wind moved through the ravine like a low moan. Exhausted but restless, the team huddled around their equipment, trying to understand the impossible. And that was when Dr. Montalvo made the connection no one else had yet considered. The symbol on the doorway, the circle intersected by 3 lines, appeared in multiple places around the site, faintly etched into loose basalt fragments, repeated in the soil markings discovered earlier, and now illuminated in the LIDAR scans, appearing at geometric intervals along the buried structure. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a key. The writing, if it could be called writing, wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be activated. The discovery reframed everything. The markings around the structure weren't decoration. They were instructions, indicators of how the doorway responded to frequency, pressure, heat, or alignment. The team realized with a chill that they had been attempting to force their way into a system built to resist force. A system meant to respond to something else entirely, something the builders understood intimately. Not violence, not intrusion, but resonance, a specific frequency, a harmonic signature, a sound. What kind of structure requires a sound to open? What kind of builders create a doorway that reads vibration? The answer was as unsettling as the doorway itself. A civilization that did not see stone as static matter, but as technology. The team would eventually discover the frequency. They would unlock the seal, and what waited behind that doorway would change everything. But that part of the story belongs to the next chapter, the moment the mountain finally spoke back. The mountain did not give up its secrets easily. It never does. In most archaeological digs, the challenge is physical, moving soil, clearing debris, stabilizing walls. Here, the challenge was something else entirely. Not force, not excavation, but understanding. When the team realized the sealed doorway wasn't meant to be broken open, the mood shifted. What had begun as excavation now felt like decoding, like trying to communicate with something ancient, patient, and far more advanced than anyone expected. They returned to the symbol carved into the basalt, a perfect circle intersected by 3 symmetrical lines. Mathematicians on the team recognized it instantly, not as art, but as a diagram, a map of harmonic ratios. The lines weren't random. They represented frequencies, frequencies that could interact. It wasn't just a key. It was a chord. When they overlaid the geometric proportions of the symbol onto the resonance data collected earlier, those faint vibrations triggered by the thermal lance, everything aligned. The doorway wasn't reacting to heat. It was reacting to tone, to pitch, to vibration. A sound would open it, but only one. The team gathered their instruments, seismographs, directional microphones, tuning oscillators. They monitored the mountain, the doorway, the stone itself, trying frequencies one by one, mapping how each subtle shift of tone caused the basalt to vibrate, hum, or silence. At 12 hertz, nothing. At 38 hertz, a faint tremor. At 72 hertz, a whisper, barely audible, more felt than heard. They were getting closer. When they played a combination of tones, multiples of the ratios engraved in the symbol, the stone reacted in a way no one expected. Not violently, not with force, but with symmetry. The seam around the doorway began to glow faintly, not with light, but with warmth. The basalt didn't heat randomly. It warmed along the exact geometric edges of the symbol, like a circuit tracing its own design. Someone in the group whispered what everyone was thinking, but didn't want to say aloud. It's waking up. The data confirmed it. For the first time since the structure was sealed, likely before the end of the last ice age, the doorway responded as if listening. The team isolated the strongest resonant point, a place where 3 harmonic frequencies intersected perfectly. When they played it again, this time using high-fidelity directional speakers aimed directly at the seam, the doorway vibrated like a struck tuning fork. The hum deepened. The ground trembled. Dust fell from the cave's ceiling in soft drifts. The basalt was responding, inviting, or warning. Every instinct told them they had found the right path, yet it felt wrong, unsettling, like opening something that did not want to be opened. They repeated the tritone frequency. This time, the vibration didn't stop. The seam along the doorway began to shift, not crack, not crumble. Shift. Basalt doesn't shift. It breaks, it fractures, it shatters, unless it was engineered to move. A narrow line appeared down the center of the door, a line they had never seen before. A faultless, razor-thin separation, like a whisper opening between 2 lips of stone. The air inside the doorway pressed outward, as if the chamber beyond had been sealed under perfect pressure for thousands of years. The instruments flickered. Static filled the radios. The oscilloscopes surged violently. A wave of low-frequency energy rolled out, not dangerous, but deeply unsettling, like sound without sound. Then the doorway stopped shifting, frozen, half open, waiting. The team stood motionless, breath caught in their throats. They were staring into a crack of complete darkness, darkness older than human memory, darkness untouched since a time when saber-tooths and mammoths roamed above. But before they could widen the opening, something else happened. A tone, faint but unmistakable, echoed from within the chamber. Not machine-like, not electronic, not natural. It was melodic. A low, steady harmonic tone that seemed to vibrate through bone rather than ear, a sound that resonated more in the chest than the air. The doorway wasn't reacting to their frequency. It was answering. The team froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Dr. Montalvo whispered, terrified, "It's not locked from the inside. It's active." Something behind that doorway, something ancient, was responding to their presence. The harmonic tone grew stronger, vibrating the equipment. Lights flickered. The ground shook again, harder this time. The team panicked. One researcher reached for the generator switch. Another screamed for everyone to back away. But just as suddenly as it started, the sound stopped. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Whatever the doorway had awakened had gone still again. The team backed away, shaken, overwhelmed, but unable to leave. This wasn't just archaeology anymore. It was contact. One-sided, faint, but real. The data reviewed that night confirmed something no one wanted to admit. The resonance pattern that came from inside the chamber matched none of their stimuli. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't feedback. It was a signature, a harmonic signature not produced by machines, wind, or geological activity. Something in that chamber was generating tone, something that had not been touched or heard for more than 12,000 years. And yet, it responded. If the doorway was a lock and the frequency was the key, then whatever lay beyond was something built to endure catastrophe, time, and silence. Something engineered to wait. The team didn't sleep that night because they knew, when they opened that doorway fully, the world would no longer be the same. The crack in the doorway widened with each controlled pulse of harmonic frequency. Not abruptly, not violently, but with the slow, deliberate movement of something ancient remembering how to breathe. The basalt parted in silence, revealing a darkness so absolute that light itself seemed hesitant to enter. For a long moment, the team simply stared. No one wanted to be the first to step into the threshold, because the moment they crossed that line, history would split into a before and after. Dr. Montalvo, trembling but composed, raised his flashlight and stepped forward. The beam reached only a few meters inside before dissolving into blackness. Not swallowed by distance, swallowed by something else, as if the darkness were not the absence of light, but a substance. When they crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped instantly, not gradually, a sudden plunge, like stepping from sunlight into a cave carved from winter. The air felt heavy, metallic, almost electrical. The instruments beeped erratically, their readings spiking and collapsing in unpredictable patterns. They scanned again. Same result. Something inside the chamber was interfering with their equipment. But not randomly, rhythmically. As they advanced, the first thing they noticed was the shape of the floor. Perfectly flat basalt, polished smooth, not by erosion, not by weathering, but by design. Even after 12,000 years, the stone reflected their lights with an uncanny sheen. Then the ceiling appeared, if it could be called a ceiling. It arched above them in a single colossal slab, unbroken, seamless, as if the entire chamber had been hewn from one monolithic block. Impossible, even with modern machinery, extracting, transporting, and hollowing such a block would be beyond engineering capability. For a prehistoric culture, it should be unthinkable. Yet here it was, unthinkable, undeniable. But the most disturbing feature wasn't the architecture. It was what occupied the center of the room. A structure stood there, rising from the floor in the shape of a truncated pillar. At first glance, it resembled an altar. Massive, square, carved from a single piece of basalt. But as the team circled it, their flashlights revealed details that made their skin crawl. The pillar was covered in carvings, not symbols, not writing, not depictions, patterns, concentric circles, intersecting triangles, waveforms, resonance diagrams, geometry. The same mathematics found on the doorway, expanded, refined, perfected. This wasn't art. This was data, encoded, organized, intentional. Montalvo leaned in, running his fingers just above the etched grooves, careful not to touch. His voice cracked as he whispered, "This is an interface." The word landed heavily in the cold air. It felt wrong. It felt right. Because the patterns didn't spiral or wander randomly. They followed recognizable sequences, Fibonacci ratios, harmonic intervals, magnetic field diagrams, even primitive star maps, though the constellations didn't match the modern sky. They matched the sky as it would have appeared before the Earth's axial tilt shifted at the end of the Ice Age. Whoever carved this did so with knowledge not only of astronomy, but of planetary mechanics. One of the researchers noticed something else. A thin, perfectly carved groove circled the entire pillar, just a few centimeters from the top, far too deliberate to be decorative. When they shone their lights inside the groove, they saw nothing unusual. But when they passed a tuning oscillator near it, the frequency readings changed dramatically. The pillar was resonant, tuned, like an instrument. When they activated the same tritone used to open the doorway, the chamber answered. A low vibration rolled through the floor, through their boots, through their bones. The carvings on the pillar seemed to shift subtly, an optical illusion triggered by the vibration, or perhaps something more. That was when the light hit the back wall. The team froze, because covering the entire far wall of the chamber was something none of them could explain. Something that defied every rule of geology, archaeology, and physics. A mural, but not carved, not painted. It shimmered, faintly metallic, as if etched into a material they had never seen before. A map, not of stars, not of continents, of the Earth's magnetic field. The lines curved and twisted, showing the planet's magnetic poles in positions they had not held for tens of thousands of years. And at several points along the lines, nodes, tiny triangular symbols marked intersections. The same symbol from the doorway, the same symbol etched into the pillar, the same symbol found scattered across the site. It was a network, a global network. The team moved closer, speechless, absorbing the implications. The nodes corresponded with known ancient sites: Göbekli Tepe, Lake Vostok, Gunung Padang, Amazonian geoglyphs, the Benin earthworks. But others corresponded to places humanity has never excavated, places still buried under ice, ocean, or jungle. The room wasn't a tomb. It wasn't a temple. It wasn't a chamber of ritual or worship. It was a control room, a place where the builders interacted with the earth, not mythically but physically. The resonance pillar was not symbolic. It was functional. And the global map carved into the wall suggested something terrifying. These ancient structures, thousands of miles apart, were not isolated. They were connected, parts of a system designed by a civilization that understood the earth at a level we are only now beginning to rediscover. While the team stood in stunned silence, the chamber trembled again, softly at first, then more forcefully. The resonance pillar was activating. They had awakened it. The lines on the mural began to glow faintly, one by one, as if responding to the vibration. And suddenly the temperature dropped further, not naturally, instantly, mechanically. Whatever the chamber had been built for, whatever its purpose was, it had not been dormant. It had been waiting. And now, after 12,000 years, it was online again. The vibration didn't stop. It deepened. Not like an earthquake, not like the groaning of shifting stone, but something far stranger. A frequency you didn't hear as much as feel. A sound older than language, older than memory, rising from the bones of the earth itself. The team stepped back cautiously as the resonance pillar continued to hum. Dust drifted from the ceiling in slow spirals. Instruments screamed with interference. Their flashlights flickered, as if something invisible were moving through the chamber, rearranging the air. Then the glowing lines on the mural shifted. They weren't static engravings. They were responding, pulsing softly, like veins illuminated from within. The team froze, barely breathing. No one dared speak, because at that moment, every instinct, scientific and primal, was telling them the same thing. This chamber was not built to be discovered. It was built to communicate. Dr. Montalvo moved forward carefully, his eyes fixed on the shimmering mural. The glowing nodes were not random. They were activating in a sequence, like a system booting up after dormancy. When the last node lit, the chamber fell silent. No sound, no vibration, no electrical interference, just an overwhelming stillness. Then the ground beneath their feet shifted, not physically, but in a way that made every hair on their bodies stand on end. A pressure change, a subtle distortion, as if the chamber had been removed from time for a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but undeniable. One of the researchers whispered, "What is it doing?" Another replied, voice trembling, "Listening." The pillar responded first. A faint glow formed at its base. Not heat, not luminescence. A kind of radiant shadow, light that behaved like darkness, bending softly along the carved geometric patterns. The light moved upward, tracing every line, every curve, every harmonic groove, as if activating the circuitry of an ancient machine. Because that's exactly what it was. The pillar wasn't symbolic, it wasn't artistic, it was a device. A device built long before the Ice Age ended, when humanity was supposedly primitive, nomadic, incapable of mathematics, astronomy, or engineering. And yet, here was proof, tangible, undeniable, that someone possessed knowledge we are still struggling to reclaim. When the glow reached the top of the pillar, something extraordinary happened. A soft, spherical wave of air expanded outward, silent, invisible, but powerful enough to knock dust from their clothing. It passed through their bodies without harm, leaving behind an indescribable sensation, like static electricity mixed with déjà vu. Then the mural changed again. The magnetic field lines reconfigured themselves, flowing into new patterns, forming shapes that looked eerily familiar. Earth's magnetic poles shifting, the planet's field weakening, a sudden inversion. It was a record, a geological memory, a warning. One of the researchers gasped. "It's showing a reversal. The last one happened around 12,000 years ago." The same time the chamber was sealed, the same time the last global cataclysm struck, the same time countless myths speak of a world-ending event. The team exchanged horrified glances. The implication was clear. The builders had foreseen, or survived, the last magnetic reversal, and they left behind a memory of it. But the mural wasn't finished. The glowing lines shifted again, revealing a second layer, this time depicting something far more violent. Bolts of plasma erupting from the sun, atmospheric collapse, lightning storms stretching across continents, seas rising and falling in unnatural waves. A solar-induced geomagnetic catastrophe, the very thing some modern researchers fear could happen again. It wasn't mythology. It wasn't speculation. It was a record of what the builders themselves had witnessed and chronicled inside this underground vault. And then came the final sequence. The glowing nodes along the carved map pulsed again, but this time in reverse order, as if replaying a past network activation. Structures on every continent, the same nodes the team had identified earlier, lit up one by one. Göbekli Tepe, Gunung Padang, Amazonian geoglyphs, Benin earthworks, subglacial Antarctic anomalies. Each site responded to the same harmonic pulse, creating a synchronized global pattern, a planetary shield, a resonance network, a defensive system built by a civilization advanced enough to understand and counter the Earth's most catastrophic cycles. The chamber wasn't just a vault, it was a control center, a place where ancient builders tuned the Earth's magnetic field, stabilizing it, harmonizing it, protecting it from solar devastation. And then the system shut down, not by accident, not by decay, but deliberately. The mural dimmed, the pillar went cold, the resonance faded. Whatever the builders once activated, they eventually turned off, and the world changed. Civilizations collapsed, continents flooded, knowledge was lost. The network disappeared beneath forests, ice, and memories. The team stood in stunned silence, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to process the enormity of what they had uncovered. Then a soft sound echoed through the chamber. A single low-frequency pulse from deep within the mountain. It wasn't geological, it wasn't structural, it wasn't natural, it was intentional. The chamber wasn't finished speaking, because the builders left behind more than a warning. They left behind instructions, and those instructions were meant for us. The pulse didn't fade. It repeated, slow, measured, rhythmic, as if something beneath the chamber was sending out a signal, not blindly, but deliberately, like a heartbeat returning after a long sleep. The team turned their equipment toward the source, but every instrument malfunctioned. Compasses spun erratically, sensors froze. The digital readouts flashed symbols instead of numbers. Only one device continued collecting data correctly. A simple analog tuning fork clamped to a seismic plate, and it was vibrating. Not from the air, not from the room, from the ground beneath them. The pulse intensified, spreading through the floor in concentric waves, resonating with a precision that felt engineered rather than natural. The mural flickered once. The pillar emitted a faint hum, sympathetic vibration, as if answering the call. Something had been triggered. But what? The team gathered around the seismic map, watching the vibrations sketch a pattern across the readings. At first, it appeared abstract. But then the pattern stabilized into a shape they recognized immediately. A circle intersected by 3 straight lines, the same symbol carved into the doorway, the same symbol etched into the pillar, the same symbol forming the nodes of the global mural. The symbol wasn't just a key, it wasn't just a signature. It was a system identifier, an identity stamp, a name. And the Earth was speaking it again. One researcher whispered, "It's not responding to us. It's responding to itself." Montalvo shook his head slowly. "No, it's responding to something we did. We activated the chamber, and now the system is looking for the others. The others, the other nodes, the other sites in the network." Before anyone could react, the seismic map lit up again, this time showing interference waves far beyond the chamber. Miles away, dozens of miles, hundreds. The pulses traveled through the ground, through strata older than recorded history, bouncing and branching like neurons firing. The chamber wasn't isolated, it was connected, still. Even after 12,000 years of dormancy, the network beneath the Earth had not entirely died. It had simply gone quiet, and now, it was waking up. The next sequence took them by surprise. A deep resonance surged through the chamber, stronger than before. The mural changed again, but this time the glowing lines didn't show a memory of the past. They showed a prediction, a model of the Earth's magnetic field not as it was, but as it is now, weakening, shifting, destabilizing. The model updated in real time like modern simulation software. And the prediction was catastrophic: pole drift accelerating, geomagnetic strength dropping, fault lines energizing, solar vulnerability increasing. The builders had understood this cycle intimately. They had experienced it. They had tried to correct it. Their network was designed to stabilize the Earth's magnetic field, or at least dampen its most violent oscillations. But the network was offline, fragmented, buried. What the chamber was showing them wasn't a warning about the past. It was a warning about the future. And the future was near. Montalvo stared at the mural, whispering the question no one wanted to confront. Is the Earth entering another reversal? Silence followed, until the pulses from the floor intensified again, forming a new symbol across the seismic readouts. A pulse map of the Earth. A line drawn between nodes, paths lighting one by one. The system wasn't just predicting an event. It was pointing towards something. Somewhere. "Look," a researcher whispered. "It's highlighting a location." The team compared the coordinates. The node wasn't Amazonian, not Indonesian, not African. It was somewhere they had not yet explored, somewhere the team had not expected. A region beneath the Atlantic Ocean, a massive, ancient tectonic ridge long believed to be geologically unremarkable. But the chamber insisted otherwise. The builders had marked it as a critical node in the global network. Something had been there, something buried, something essential, a forgotten piece of the system. As they processed the coordinates, the resonance pillar trembled again, this time emitting a brief harmonic tone unlike the earlier pulses. Not a warning, not a response, a message, a sequence of tones that formed a pattern, a harmonic signature pointing toward activation. "What is that?" someone asked. Montalvo swallowed hard. "A startup sequence." The pillar hummed louder, the grooves glowing with soft golden light. The chamber was powering up, not fully, but partially, as if trying to bring the global network back online. But that was impossible. The network was broken. Most of the nodes were buried, damaged, or lost beneath oceans and ice. Unless the system wasn't meant to rely on its original builders. Unless the network was designed to activate automatically when the Earth reached a certain threshold of instability. Unless the builders had predicted this moment, predicted us. One researcher gasped as the realization struck them all. We weren't supposed to find this, but we were supposed to be here. The builders hadn't left behind a warning. They left behind an inheritance. A system waiting for the next civilization capable of understanding resonance, frequency, and global mapping. A system waiting for the next society with satellites, LIDAR, and seismic sensing equipment. A system waiting for now. A deep rumble shook the room, but this time it came not from the chamber, but from the Earth itself. A distant tremor, like a giant stirring beneath the crust. The team exchanged terrified glances. The network was starting, but without all of its nodes, without all of its components, the activation would be unstable. If the system came online incomplete, the consequences could be catastrophic. The Earth remembered what happened the last time the network failed, and the chamber was telling them, clearly, fix the network, restore the nodes, rebuild the system, or face the same fate the builders did. For the first time since they entered the chamber, the meaning of their discovery became painfully clear. This wasn't just the most disturbing ancient find ever uncovered. It was a responsibility, and the Earth had just handed it to them when history collapses. They stood in the chamber long after the last tremor faded, surrounded by the silence of a world older than anything in human memory. The pillar had gone dormant again, the glowing mural had dimmed back to stone, and the subterranean hum dissolved into stillness. Yet the weight of the discovery lingered like a pressure on the chest, invisible, inescapable, undeniable. Nothing felt the same anymore. Not the chamber, not the world above it, not even time. Because once you witness the Earth remembering, you cannot return to the version of history that forgets. The team gathered near the entrance, their flashlights casting soft halos across the polished basalt. No one spoke. No one dared to break the moment. Because deep inside, each of them understood that this was not the end of a discovery. It was the beginning of a responsibility. The chamber had shown them a world humanity was never meant to see until it was ready. A world in which ancient builders understood the Earth like a living organism. A world where cataclysms weren't mythical stories, but recorded cycles. A world where civilizations rose and fell according to rhythms far older than writing, agriculture, or empires. A world that once possessed knowledge powerful enough to tune the planet itself. And now, that knowledge had resurfaced, not as myth, not as legend, but as evidence carved in stone. The most disturbing discovery wasn't the chamber. It wasn't the pillar, or the map, or the harmonic locks. It was the realization that humanity was never the first civilization to reach this level of intelligence. We were simply the first to forget. As the team prepared to leave, Dr. Montalvo paused at the threshold, looking back one last time at the impossible architecture. The chamber seemed almost peaceful now, as if satisfied that its message had finally been delivered. But that peace was deceptive, because the chamber had also shown them what comes next. On the mural, the projected models of the Earth's magnetic field weren't predictions. They were countdowns, patterns accelerating faster today than at any point in recorded history. Anomaly zones growing, geomagnetic drift increasing, solar vulnerability rising. The builders hadn't created their network to glorify themselves. They created it because they knew what was coming, because they had lived through it once and paid the price. The team reached the surface hours later. Dawn was breaking. The mountains were quiet. The sky glowed pale with the first touch of rising light. But beneath that peaceful horizon was a truth capable of shaking the foundations of everything humanity believes about itself. Civilization wasn't a straight line. It was a cycle. And cycles return. The world would never accept this discovery easily. Institutions would deny it. Governments would bury it. Academics would ridicule it. And the public, at least at first, would call it impossible, the same way they once dismissed deep Amazonian cities, Antarctic anomalies, and pre-Ice Age megaliths. But the truth has weight, and weight eventually breaks the surface. The team documented everything: scans, recordings, seismic maps, frequency logs. They knew they couldn't reveal it recklessly, but they also knew it couldn't remain hidden. Because if the builders left behind a message, it wasn't meant for museums or governments. It was meant for us, for the people alive during the next great shift, for the civilization standing on the same threshold the builders once faced, for the generation that would need to understand what the Earth was becoming. The chamber wasn't a tomb, it wasn't a monument, it wasn't a mystery to be solved. It was a warning, a manual, a memory alive beneath the crust, the last surviving voice of a world that collapsed under the weight of its own forgotten knowledge. As the wind swept across the mountains, carrying dust, sunlight, and silence, the team realized the magnitude of their role. They were no longer researchers, they were witnesses. Witnesses to a truth older than history, a truth buried by time, catastrophe, and human amnesia, a truth that refused to die. And the greatest fear, the one none of them dared voice, was simple. What if the builders didn't fail? What if they succeeded just long enough? What if their warning was never meant to save them, but to save whoever came after? Because the chamber didn't wake by accident. It woke because humanity is approaching the same threshold, the same instability, the same fragile moment the builders once faced, and the Earth is beginning to pulse again. The question now is not who built the chamber, not how the structure was made, not even why it was sealed. The real question, the one that will shape our future, is the one the builders left behind in stone, in resonance, in geometry. Will we listen? Or will we become another forgotten chapter in the cycle? The most disturbing ancient discovery we were never meant to see might also be the one we were meant to remember.